As it becomes clear that the Chinese government is an unreliable source of information about the disease, the actual scope and severity at its source lacks any kind of reliable barometer.
In Stephen King's The Stand, the scariest thing in the world is a sneeze.
The master of horror's engrossing, sweat-inducing, sinisterly plausible 1,400-page epic is about the inception and spread of an extremely deadly global pandemic, kick-started out of a biological testing facility in the American Midwest and sent hurtling in all directions with irrepressible speed.
Wildly contagious, with a mortality rate somewhere above the 99th percentile, the disease takes the shape of a vicious flu mutation, an incurable malady that steamrolls the human immune system and can kill overnight. As it briskly sweeps the nation, like a very lethal chain letter, we come to dread King's allusions to mundane symptoms, to the mild coughs and runny noses and the death and destruction they herald.
Her nose began to tickle, King describes, of a nurse on duty at a hospital where the ill are under quarantine.
She got her hanky out of her pocket and sneezed lightly 3 times. By this point what he means is clear. This nurse, and indeed the entire hospital, is done for. When I flew into Toronto from the United Kingdom earlier this week, an air of caution, even suspicion, prevailed.
Face masks were more abundant than eye masks.
People scrutinized their fellow passengers for dissimulated signs of illness, for the errant sniffle that would give away the latent disease. When, in an airport bar, I made the mistake of audibly clearing my throat, someone sitting nearby moved away. That was the level of risk management in operation, the degree of vigilance and guardedness that had taken over.
Everyone was worried about coronavirus.
Anyone could have it, and like readers of The Stand, we had become acutely sensitive to the evidence. A sneezing flyer might be an unwitting host. The very possibility was terrifying. A sneezing flyer might be an unwitting host. The very possibility was terrifying. What makes The Stand so effective is its uncanny realism, the sense that King has devised not a far-fetched science fiction scenario, but a credible account of how a terminal super virus such as this might spread. And while King's influenza mutation is rather more fatal, the parallels between the disease of The Stand and the coronavirus that emerged in the Chinese city of Wuhan in December, and continues to circulate internationally, are difficult to ignore. King correctly surmised the alarm and confusion that would surround the rapid expansion of a disease that isn't well understood, and the panic that would seep into the hearts and minds of the public as they attempt to discern the seriousness of the threat. Most disturbingly, he predicted the air of secrecy that would obtain, by unspoken proclamation of an unforthcoming government. King imagined drastic efforts to suppress the truth, reporters indiscriminately assassinated, bogus reassurances publicized, entire infected towns roped off and simply left to perish. The Chinese government has taken a subtler approach. As the virus first began to spread throughout the Wuhan area late last year, some have speculated as early as September, based on figures and estimates of the rate of infection. News about the nature of the disease, its origins and its growth was unusually hard to come by, as Chinese officials continued to insist, despite every appearance to the contrary, that coronavirus was nothing to worry about, and that the outbreak was under control. Their attempts to underplay the gravity of the crisis had the ironic effect of making the government seem even less equipped to deal with the situation appropriately. As they maintained that everything was fine, it started to seem worse than anyone thought. The campaign of false comfort reached a head with the case of Li Wenlang. An ophthalmologist from Wuhan, Li was one of the earliest people to raise alarm about the appearance of what appeared to be a deadly new virus. After publicizing his concerns online, he was detained by the police and forced to confess publicly to having maliciously spread rumors, and further to pledge to stop. Shortly thereafter, Li contracted the coronavirus. A week ago, the illness took his life. Naturally, the Chinese public were outraged by the hypocrisy, the mendacious lunacy, that Li's death laid bare. But while this event has unmistakably and irrevocably eroded the trust of the people in a government that has long maintained control through suppression and deceit, it has also further inspired anxiety around the precise extent of the coronavirus crisis, as it becomes increasingly clear that the Chinese government is an unreliable source of information about the disease. The actual scope and severity of the illness at its source lacks any kind of reliable barometer. In the face of travel bans, heightened security, and the largest-scale quarantine ever orchestrated of the city of Wuhan, the authoritarian Chinese President Xi Jinping assures his country, and the rest of the world, that coronavirus is under control and on the verge of winding down. Having plainly demonstrated a commitment to mistruth, how can we believe him? What we don't about coronavirus has made it more frightening. In the absence of transparency, it's easy to imagine anything could be true, including that a challenging but ultimately manageable new disease has extraordinary destructive power. In the wake of early waves of widespread panic, health officials across the world were quick to remind people that coronavirus was still relatively mild, and ought to be of far less concern than, for instance, the run-of-the-mill flu, which is far more contagious and deadly. But there is nothing mysterious about the flu as we know it. And the sense of mystery around corona, the impression of a cover-up, of things being obscured or otherwise kept under wraps, is precisely what makes it seem so terrifying. Fear spreads even more quickly than disease. Misinformation is even more contagious. The Chinese government's mishandling of the coronavirus, from its earliest efforts to suppress those who spoke out about it to its continued vagueness around facts and figures related to infection, has created a culture of doubt and uncertainty around the disease, amplifying concerns and leaving the severity of the crisis unclear. It seemed possible, as China had argued, that the virus might merely peter out, as infections level off and those who were sick get better. Perhaps our alarm is overblown. Or perhaps it's worse than we fear. It seems apparent that, whether a pandemic or not, one lingering consequence will be the tarnished reputation of the Chinese government, which has disillusioned millions of its citizens in its desperation to maintain the appearance of control. The mystery in which the coronavirus has been frustratingly shrouded has made us all fearful of the disease, and has made us rightly distrust the people who are intended to keep us safe from such crises. Until we know more, we have little choice but to worry about the possibilities, or remain optimistic and hope for the best. How concerned should we be about all this, really? The problem is that we really don't know, and we can't really trust anyone to tell us. Thanks for watching. Please click the subscribe button.